Good morning. Welcome to Fred Buzz, the podcast. My name is Joe McMurray.
And I'm Aaron Sefcik.
And today we're going to continue our conversation that we started a couple weeks ago, discussing the recording studio and everything there is to do with recording. And hopefully we'll touch on some production this week. We have a special guest. Mr. Tynz Hampton is here from District Entertainment Studios, which is in Alexandria, Virginia. Welcome, Tynz.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
So Tynz and I have a history together. Tynz is he owns and runs the studio where I did really most of my first recording when I was playing in my band Albino Rhino. We were doing this recording through a local record label, and the record label paid for us to record with Tynz. And so I got to go in there and really spent the bulk of that first period just recording with one of your engineers.
Yeah.
And later on we started, I think it was because our EP, I was mixing a lot with you. I wanted to watch how you did it.
Yeah.
And I basically sat every minute of you mixing that album and learned a lot from you. And then you started bringing me in to run some sessions.
Oh, yeah. I miss you.
I wish I could do that more.
Yeah, man.
It was really, really fun. I learned so much from you. So, yeah. So, do you want to tell everybody about your studio?
Absolutely, man. I started off working with a acoustic rock band. Actually, I was managing the band, and we did the rounds to the different studios and things like that. And what we ended up settling on was, okay, let's just build a small setup in the basement, and let's see how that works out for us, just to record there. The pricing for recording, to be able to kind of sit and do some creation can get pretty expensive. So, as a group, we just decided, okay, we're just going to build out my basement and, record there. And that way we can get everything perfect before we go to the studio. The plan was to go to a, very professional recording studio here in Falls Church. Very nice Michael Jackson and Prince on the wall.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so we were excited to go there. And, what ended up happening was what we recorded in the basement, we ended up liking actually better than what we did there, which was unfortunate because, the band and including myself, we invested a lot in being able to go there and record. And, it was a situation where, we just were kind of disappointed, is the best way to put it. It was just a situation where, I didn't feel like, maybe we just didn't have enough of a budget. We spent tons and tons of hours there, but maybe our budget just wasn't large enough to get the A treatment. Yeah. So, we were pretty much happier with what we did in the basement than we were with what we did when we went there into the studio. And half, to be fair, half of that was performance and half of that was, just the quality of recording, but definitely half of it was performance. I think, we were just more comfortable and more relaxed, working at home at that time. And, what that led to was, me working with the band, more recording at home. Then we went back for mixing and mastering. And, we did, a first round of mixing and mastering, quick mixes, quick masters at home, just so we could say, okay, this is kind of what we have in mind. And we went in there and we spent probably 120 hours on mixing and mastering. And it came out where we like better what we did at home. Right. And, it was very unfortunate because, it wasn't a situation where we were even looking to compete. It was just a situation where we were more so just looking for better quality than what we were getting at home. And, again, same thing, it came back where we just like better what we did at home. So that gave me two things. It gave me the confidence to know that I actually could do, quality recordings, number one. But number two, it gave me, a little bit of inspiration and, okay, maybe I can try this mixing and mastering thing and see how it works out. And that's kind of where District Entertainment Studios was born. Unfortunately, after that situation, we blew our whole budget, recording and mixing and mastering there in the studio. And, the band just disseminated between that and politics. You know,
Yeah.
like the worst thing for a band to discuss is politics. Just don't even talk about it. And, you know, just one random night, they were practicing and I had to go somewhere with my wife. And I told them they were talking politics. And I said, you guys stop talking politics.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the music, man. Just stop talking about it.
That's right.
And even if it does, then, you know, just let the creator create, but you guys don't, you know, dive into it too much. So, you know, yeah, okay, Tynz, no problem. I left and I got a call about an hour later. Lead singer of the band's bawling, crying. And the band's broken up, Tynz. I was like, oh man, I knew I shouldn't have left. I knew I shouldn't have left. But, you know, things happen for a reason. And that's kind of what led us to being able to, you know, pick up and record and everything. And, you know, start, you know, we opened the studio in Alexandria back in 2004. And we're actually still there. So, you know, things happen for a reason, like I said, and, you know, that's kind of the reason why, you know, I guess that happened to us. It allowed me to be able to learn what I needed to learn to record, mix, and master. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have
Oh yeah,
your knowledge combined with Aaron's knowledge. And we really talked a lot last time about microphones and some about audio interfaces and the actual process of recording and kind of preparation for recording, you know, as the artist, preparation to going into the studio.
Getting it right at the source, man. It's all about getting it right at the source.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But there's this thing that people like to refer to studio magic. And you know, you do need to get it right at the source, but there are some incredible things that can be done on the computer. Maybe we should talk about those things so that if our listeners, if artists understand the limitations and the capabilities on the computer side, then they'll be able to prepare better, and you know, they won't leave a take that's mediocre thinking that it can be fixed in the studio when maybe it can't.
Exactly.
On the computer.
Joe, you know, what happens a lot of times, man, is people think that, you know, the title of mixing and mastering, oh, we'll get it in the mix. Oh, we'll get it in the mix. You hear it said a lot of times in the studio. And what I've come to learn is that getting it in the mix actually takes a lot more time than just doing it over one time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You know, and the thing is just like what you just said is absolutely correct. The source. If you can get your recordings, well, before that, even performance, you know, like a lot of times, you know, people will stay up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then come in the morning for a session, and they're tired, their brain's tired. And, you know, and it just, things don't go the way that they were anticipating or hoping that they would go. And a lot of times the reason is just that you're tired, you know, and you have to get rest before your sessions. If you're a singer, you know, musician, you know, especially drummer, you got to have that energy. You know, just getting some rest. If it's a night session, try not to work too hard during the day, you know, get some rest, you know, and those are the little things that I've learned, you know, even before you start talking equipment, you know, if you can just get some rest and get your energy together and get yourself in a mental state where you feel creative, where you're excited to make music, you're going to get a better performance. You're going to get, you know, a lot more out of your process. And even before that guy goes into mixing and mastering, you already have beautiful, wonderful takes. So, you know, even the takes that aren't keepers should be good enough to be keepers. You know, we just want to get it a little bit better if we can.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. You definitely want to be able to go into the studio well rested. You don't want to be sick. You don't want to be feeling down or you know, emotionally in sometimes it's good to be emotionally in some kind of space, because that might add to the creative process. But you definitely want to be well rested. Otherwise you're just hitting a wall, man. You're digging your own grave.
Absolutely. And I've had singers come in, you know, right after work, and, you know, we get through 3 or 4 takes and they're already scratchy. And I ask them, what have you been doing today? Oh, well, I was on the phone most of the day at work and, you know, and talking, and then I had a presentation to do. It's like, no, like, you know, that's an instrument. Like, you know, that this is just like any other instrument. And if you wear it down, it's not going to sound as good as it would if it was fresh. Yeah. And I mean, so I've gotten that a lot of times. What I do usually, Joe, is I send them home. As an engineer, you can't always, you definitely can't always be about finances. And, I would love to sit there with them and have them banging against the wall for 5 hours, but it's not making the most out of the time that they're paying you for. And, what happens is that, when people are paying you for a service, if they're not getting out of that service what they wanted to get out of that service, then they're not going to continue to come to you. So, sometimes giving them, hey, we're going to stop at 2 hours today. I know you had 5 hours, but you sound terrible.
Yeah.
And you have to be honest and straightforward, and, because you hear it and they don't. So, they'll just continue on.
Yeah.
The full 5 hours, they'll just keep going because they enjoy being in the studio. But to you, it's a business. And, even though it's creative and it's fun and it's exciting, you're not going to be able to be in business if you don't have the customers or the clientele to keep you in business.
No, ultimately, it comes back to you in the end. I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely. And they're going to blame you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, they're going to blame you. So if they stay there 5 hours and they've spent, $200, $250 on studio time, and they stay there 5, 6 hours and don't get anything done, when they go and talk to people about what they did in the studio, it's not going to be, oh, well, I was tired that day. And, they're not going to accept the responsibility. Oh, it just doesn't sound good is what they're going to say.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And then they may never finish the project. And if they blow that much.
Exactly. And what's going to happen is they're going to go to another studio and do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
The exact same thing. So, it's not going to change a bit. The sound's not going to change a bit. And they're just going to bounce around and bounce around and bounce around. And, what I've learned is sometimes, not getting paid for that 3 hours will earn you 30 hours later on. Yeah. So sometimes taking a step back might earn you 4 or 5 steps forward.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Yeah.
It's good. Good business sense.
Yeah. Ultimately, you want the product to be good on the back end, because then your customer is going to be able to go to all his friends and be able to say, look what I recorded, man. This sounds awesome. You got to check out the studio. They did a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a reflection on you. And that's extremely important. You got to have that long vision. You really do.
Yeah. And like you go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and if you feel like if you experience something like that, you really gain a trust in your engineer that they're not trying to rip you off. They really have your best interest at heart. And so that trust in your engineer goes a long, long way in not only being comfortable working with them, but in investing larger amounts of money in that studio.
Absolutely.
This guy's got my back. I'm willing to put down $2,000 to record my album here.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, you do want to have their back, because what they're paying you for is your knowledge, not just, for you to press the button and make their stuff sound pretty. Like, they're paying you for your knowledge, your experience. And, through experience, we've all learned, what fatigue does to creativity. Like, it definitely tears down, the creative gene gets damaged by your fatigue. If you're tired, if you're not, and some days you just don't have it. And, I can definitely, say at least 20 to 25 times in all of my days, there's been, at least 20 or 25 times when I've told somebody, you just don't have it today. We can continue to record if you decide to continue to record, or you can listen to me, you can go home and you can come back on a day when you do have it. And, they'll get offended. That's going to be the first. Yeah, they're going to get offended. What's wrong with it? What do you mean? And they're going to get offended at first, but, eventually they'll understand that, what you're looking to do is make good quality recordings. That's the first step to everything. And if if the performance isn't good, I can't make that good. Like, I don't care how good of an engineer you are, you can't make performance better. So, hey, I know there's some great engineers out there, but if you go to them and ask them, hey, can you make me sound like Michael Jackson the way I sound now? And they're going to say, no, I can't make you sound like Michael Jackson. Exactly. Performance is everything. So, just preparation, getting some rest. If you're a singer, having something warm to drink, not drinking a lot of ice and cold water, soda. And I mean, things like that. There's a lot of little techniques that go into recording way before you even get to the point where you're recording anything. So that's what I've learned, and that's kind of what has helped us, to, in a environment where it's kind of hard for recording studios these days to stay in business because of everything that we have at home nowadays. That's allowed me to keep some pretty loyal customers and be able to stay in business all this time. Like I said, we've been there 14 years now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
yeah, and the other part of it is that I'm kind of thinking about is a lot of these people who do have a home studio, you are stuck kind of inside your head, and it's nice to be able to go to a producer, and I kind of want to get into that as well, producer versus engineer. But when you go to a producer, that outside mind, that expertise in something, or a different viewpoint, or being able to kind of hit something in a different angle, that's extremely important, because having another viewpoint on a phrase, or some kind of chord progression, or having that outside view is extremely beneficial to be able to say, you know what, that may not work, or hey, how about let's try this, or having that extra viewpoint is extremely beneficial. Whereas if you have that in your, if you're doing it in your own studio, you don't have that. Sometimes
Right.
you can get boxed in. And what I hear a lot is, after a couple projects, man, it's all starting to sound the same. Well, yeah, because you're stuck in your head, man.
Yeah, exactly. And working from home also, what I found is a lot of times, just like you said, you get in your own head and you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And what happens is that, project never gets done. You can't do a verse and work on that verse for 7, 8, 9 hours and then come back tomorrow and work on that same verse for another 7, 8, 9. That project's not going to get finished, because what's going to happen is, especially if you're making music that has any social consciousness to it at all, time passes. And as time passes, things change. So lyrics and vocals that are relevant now may not be relevant 6 months from now. You got to get your music out now.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that, for me, that I push, every artist that I work with. I'm not rushing you through the process, but I do want you to get your music out now, because right now it's fresh, it's new, and it's new to you. So you're going to be more likely to push it harder. You're going to be more likely to be excited to perform it and do things, with the music, than you will be if you've listened to it 15,000 times. And then at that point, it's becoming old, but it's only old to you.
Yeah.
It's not old to the rest of the world. But, as long as we can get it out to them while it's relevant, then we have an opportunity there. But, once that time passes, all of us, every style of music, from rock to pop to hip hop, everything, in between, underneath, in the head, there's always going to be a shelf life for when that music needs to be released. Once it's released, the music lives forever. It has no shelf life. But until it is released, it has a shelf life. And, that's something I try to, explain to people. I know that sometimes you can get away with releasing an older project and things and changing a few words here and there. But I've noticed how people will push the music and work so much harder on the music, getting it into people's hands when it's new. And as time passes and it gets old to you, that excitement just starts to tail off.
I think I'm a perfect example of that. With my project with Albino Rhino, we recorded that first album, and then due to complications with the record label, it basically got put on the shelf. And in the meantime, we recorded a separate EP, and then we went through some lineup changes in the band, got a new drummer, got a keyboard player. I went to music school. Like a couple of years passed there where the music really sat, and we were performing a lot of those songs, but by the time we actually released that album, our hearts were not in those songs, and it was hard to. I had to I re-recorded all my vocals.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't stand the sound of my voice from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was not efficient from a money point of view, and it was exhausting.
Another thing that I noticed with artists when they come into a studio is these songs are babies. you know, we look after them sometimes for years, and we
Yeah.
nurture them, and we, you know, we want them to be absolutely perfect. But the
Yeah.
problem with that is that in the studio, at least in my experience, there is no such thing as perfect. Because it's perfection is your own worst enemy in the studio, because the longer that you work at something, it drags out for a very long period of time. And just like you were saying, Tynes, there's a shelf life, and you honestly want to get as much material out as possible now.
Yes.
Because if you keep on working on that one thing for years and years and years, most likely you're just never going to get it done, because you're looking for perfection, and that's just a never-ending chase. You're never going to reach perfection. The only way that you're going to get better at something is if you release a bunch of stuff. And it's just like any instrument that you practice. It's going to take years. You can't just say, okay, tomorrow or next week is going to be, you know, I'm going to be the perfect guitar player. It's going to take years, and it's going to take many mistakes of going through that practice, and eventually you'll kind of get there. Same thing with songwriting. The more stuff you release, sure, your first batch of stuff is going to be it's going to be mediocre, but you have to go through that process in order to get to the 12th one, where it's just like, now I'm starting to get it. So this process of perfection is not good for anybody who goes into the studio. Just try your best and know that you did your best, and the next one's even going to be better.
Absolutely. I have 2 points on that also. When it comes to artists, what I've noticed is I always tell them, hey, you know, work and do the best you can, just like you just said, and put it out. Because what happens is as you get better, that's what allows fans to grow with you. And, you know, they hear the improvement in your music. They hear the improvement in your vocal. They hear the improvement of the sound quality, even, because we get better as we go along.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's what actually goes into getting a fan to be a fan. Like, they want to see the growth. They want to see, you know, grow with you, you know, and that they are growing with you. But if they only get to hear you once, then they can't grow with you, you know, and that's why I say, you know, do the music, put it out, go on to the next one. But there is one more piece to that, though, that I'm starting to, you know, and it took me a while to figure this out. Sometimes I kind of feel like some artists are comfortable in the process, as opposed to going out and dealing with the rejection and dealing with the, you know, the judgment that we all go through. You know, even as engineers, guitar players, singer, whatever it is, you're going to go through judgment. And a lot of times people are scared of that part of the process, the judgment, the part of the process where somebody's going to tell you, hey, that sucks, I don't like it. And what are you going to do? You know, how are you going to bounce back from that? Or is that going to be something that totally tears you apart? And I think that part of the process is, you know, the worst part of the process to me, because it limits creativity. A lot of people don't have that, you know, just that drive where nothing's going to stop them, but they do have talent. So, you know, it's kind of like, because of the fact that they don't have that drive where nothing can possibly stop them, we're going to miss out on hearing all of that great talent. So, you know, those are the 2 things that I would say about, you know, why people hold on to their music, you know, and it's sad because, you know, I'm dealing with an artist right now. She's very talented. We'll do 1,000 takes, and, you know, and I'll go in and I'll tell her, I say, hey, I have more than enough to do what I need to do with this. And, oh, I don't know, Tynz, it just doesn't sound good to me. And I just tell her, you know, eventually I just stopped the session. I said, you know, are you really looking to put music out? Or are you looking to stay in here with me where it's nice and comfortable?
Right.
And, you know, and she started crying, and I felt bad because I didn't mean to make her start crying, but she needed to deal with that. That's something that she needed to hear and needed to know, that that's what I was feeling, is that she's just comfortable in the studio and didn't really want to leave that process.
Yeah. It's hard to put yourself out there, man. It is.
It is. It is. And I understand that. But, you know, as an engineer, I think, you know, part of our responsibility is to help artists along. And that's going to be a part of the process that they're going to have to, sooner or later, and, you know, maybe not right now, but sooner or later, you're going to have to go out there and deal with that part of the process. There's no way around it. And, you know, and that's the part where I just, you know, it, like I said, it kind of sucks sometimes, because I really want people to put their music out there. But at the same time, I understand, because you don't want once somebody tells you it sucks, it kind of brings down a little bit of your excitement, of course, depending on your personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's bound to happen.
It is.
It's bound to happen.
Everybody's not going to like everything.
No.
Don't worry about it. Just make music.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to tell them all the time. But, you know, like I said, sometimes it just gets to the point where they're not going to listen to you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Joe, I'd be interested in hearing what you think about that situation, being an artist, man.
No, I mean, I think that I record the songs that I've recorded. I think I enjoy the recordings as much more than anybody else. I also hate them more than anybody else, but I mean, they're timestamps to me, and I nitpick everything about them, and it's painful to listen to the things that I know I could do better now. But I really do like listening myself, and I have had very, very little success actually getting my music out into the world, and part of that's my own fault. I haven't followed through. That's not where my focus in my life has been, much more on improving my musical skills, and I think I've not invested the time and energy into promotion, and like I haven't wanted to put $1,000 into a promotional campaign, but I'll put $1,000 into, you know, my studies, like getting better at the guitar,
Right.
singing. But so I have a different viewpoint on it, in that I'm not trying to get, you know, millions of people to listen to my music. I mean, I would love that, but my recordings have been largely for me, for my friends and family, for my own like use in like getting gigs and things. Like, hey, can I play here? Here's a recording of me playing. So anyway, I love going in the studio. I'm actually working on a couple tracks here at the house, and I like the creative process of recording to kind of bring my ideas to life, and I think the studio is a great way to do that. So I'd like to get more into the actual intricacies of recording and mixing, especially.
There you go.
I mean, we talk about all these, like, taking lots of takes, and I mean, some of the big things that I've learned over my time recording have been, okay, I had this like perfect first verse, at least in my mind then, but the second verse wasn't so good. Well, I go in and record the second verse. It's a different day. My voice has a bit of a different timbre to it. And then I'm like, well, I don't want to re-record the first verse because it's perfect. But then you get to the second verse and it sounds noticeably different. And there's some things that you can do with EQ and changing the reverb and effects to try to make it sound more like one take. But you know, it doesn't always work. But I want to get into those things. I want to start talking about those things. Maybe get some people interested in actually spending more time in the mixing process.
Yeah. Well, you know, when it comes to things like that, Joe, just like you said, the whole key is EQ. You know, your voice is your voice. No matter if we do it today or do it next year, your voice is actually still going to be your voice. Now, what can be different is the energy. So generally what I'll do in situations like that, where, you know, we're doing either a punch in on a piece, or we're doing, you know, a different, you know, take, like you said, between verse 1 and verse 2 on different days. What I'll usually do is have you sit there and listen to verse 1 over and over, 3, 4, 5 times. And then I say, match that. And, you know, and the thing is a lot of times artists aren't even thinking about that part. They're really just thinking about giving a great performance, which should be, you know, of course, that's number one. But being that we already have something there that we're trying to match to, we have to actually take that time to make sure we are matching to that original take. You know, sometimes in those situations, it is better to try another take on verse 1. If you feel like it's just perfect, though, I don't like messing with perfect. You know, once you say the word perfect, I like to leave it alone if possible. But, you know, sometimes if that second verse comes out, you know, that much better to where you're that much happier with it, it might be worth it just to go ahead and do a few more takes on that take 1 and see if we have something that matches better than necessarily having that, you know, take 1's wonderful, take 2 is just okay. You know, but like you said, the key to that is EQ, You know, like your engineer has to have the ear to be able to make you sound like, you know, even with guitar playing, like, you know, sometimes just the positioning of the microphone can cause the, you know, a totally different sound. And, you know, if we've gotten great recordings, it's up to your engineer to match those two things together. And EQ is the way to get that done. And to be honest with you, outside of you and I, most people don't hear a difference whatsoever. But, you know, like we don't know that, you know, we don't think that way. But outside of us, nobody really hears it. You know, they're just enjoying music.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're skipping from verse 1 to verse 2, verse 1 to verse 2. That's not how they're listening to the song.
They're recording it or something.
There you go. So they're not paying any attention to how verse 1 and verse 2 necessarily match up. They're just enjoying the song. So, you know, they're listening totally different from us. And that's something we got to keep in mind also, because it does give us a break in situations like that. Yeah.
Well, this idea of where am I going with this? The EQ. One of the biggest things I took from both you and Aaron was, you know, both of you, most engineers, it seems like, start mixing the drums, and you're sitting there, you know, kick drum, EQ, and finding the sonic space, carving out a sonic space for each instrument so that you don't have both the bass guitar and the kick drum at 80 hertz. You know, you have kick drum at 80 and the bass guitar at 100, so that you're not competing volume levels. You can keep both instruments at a nice volume, and they're both heard because they're EQ'd to a different frequency. So that's something that I think that is really fascinating. And Rick Beato actually did a great episode on that. I don't know if you've listened to him on YouTube, but he does like a whole lesson on how to, you know, some general EQ settings and how to think about it.
Okay.
Aaron turned me on to that.
Yeah. And I'm gonna tell you, there's another piece that you use to that: panning. Panning. I mean, you know, and it's almost like the forgotten weapon sometimes, you know, like, but you can always use your panning to separate and give yourself a little bit of space. And that's something that I had to learn because, you know, I generally was from the school of, okay, you know, my bottom frequencies are usually be in the middle and, you know, kind of build it on out. But sometimes, you know, things being a little bit off kilter actually makes them sound better. Yeah. And, you know, the panning and, you know, like we talked about the EQ, of course, but, you know, a lot of times the panning can provide you a separation between two things that are extremely similar that you may need. It may be where and it might not be a lot, you know, on 0 to 100, 0 to 100, if we say, you know, hey, push that bass over just to -5, just a little bit off to the right, and then push that kick maybe over to 2. And we're not talking about a lot. We're talking about 7 degrees out of 200.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it just provides you the separation you need to be able to get the sound to come through the way you want to hear it. Yeah. And, you know, like I said, panning is something, you know, you're always learning. And, you know, the first thing I learned was panning, but the first thing that I revisited when I'm relearning what I'm doing is panning, because you know, you kind of forget that, you know, panning is there to be used for just what you just said, to open up your mix a little bit and give everything some space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're looking for within the mix. Every mix is different. Every genre is different. Joe, you were talking about bass and kick. I mean, kick is something that usually is going to stay the same frequency throughout the entire song. So you want to kind of notch that out. Let's just say it is 78 hertz or something like that. And then you go over to the bass and you notch that out so they don't occupy the same frequency. That's one thing, because the bass is a moving instrument. Obviously, it goes all over the place. It's not going to just sit in one frequency, whereas the kick is. And then the other thing that you can do if you want to get a little more separation out of the bass and the kick is a little bit of side chaining. So every time that the kick hits, you can duck it out so the bass kind of rides over top of it, or vice versa, depending on what kind of song you're kind of looking for. There's many different ways you can kind of go about making something stick out a little bit more. And again, it all depends on the mix and what you want your central focus to be on.
Go back to this idea of side chaining. You're actually, so you're saying when the kick drum hits and there happens to be a bass note at the same frequency at the same time,
correct,
the computer automatically pulls the volume level of the kick drum down?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I'm still learning that one myself, Joe. Like, like I said, it's a constant, you're constantly learning. I had a project that I was working on that's a little bit of pop music. And it had, right now, a lot of the pop songs have those deep, hip hop basses, the deep sub bass, I should say. And of course, the sub bass was registering right where the kick is.
Yeah.
So, it sounded great to them, but, I would always hear it and I would just, oh man, like, it was just this one note all the way through, every 4 measures. There was just this one note that was just registering right where the bass was. And I would be like, you guys don't hear that? They're like, no, it sounds great. I'm like, oh, and it almost disgusts you, because it's like everything is perfect except for that one note. Side chaining. That's how you fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I mean, I could go on and on and on for hours and hours and hours.
Oh yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. But another thing that I would want to tell potential engineers out there and potential producers who are looking into this, something that comes up over and over and over, because I do weekly classes with a couple of my students on recording, is that we like things loud. We like things loud. I hear it all the time going down the road. Somebody's, got their stereo up booming, and it's just like, I did that too at one time in my life. I had a pair of 12s in the back, and I love to feel that bass. I loved it.
Yeah.
I love feeling that. There's nothing like it. It's great, but there's a downside to that. There's something called the Fletcher Munson Curve. And we as engineers have to be aware of that. It's cool when you have the client in the room. You're like, yeah, you turn it up and you want the client to feel it. You want them to be a part of the music. You want them to be moved by their own sound. Absolutely. But when the doors are closed and, it's after hours, it is extremely important that you as an engineer and you as a producer are mixing around 80 dB, around that, give or take a couple of dB, because what naturally happens with frequencies is that when you start turning things up, bass and treble, lows and highs, naturally go up, and your mids stay the same. You lose definition, and you actually start mixing differently. It's part of our ears. It's this thing that happens where mid frequencies just kind of don't turn up the way lows and highs do. Same thing when you turn things down. The opposite happens. Your lows and your treble, your highs, they turn down and your highs stay. So you can actually hear things that are mid-rangey a little bit easier the lower you turn your volume. So there's this kind of thing that happens. You have to be very aware of that. We as engineers have to be aware of that when we are mixing, that we don't mix loud for long periods of time. Plus, you can also your ears will actually start to not close, but they will actually, you will mix completely different if you start mixing at like 100 dB or 90 dB all the time. It's extremely important that you walk away, mix for a good 20 minutes and walk away and come back. Most oftentimes you will hear something completely different. You have to take breaks for your ears. It's important. I mean, for engineers, these are your instruments.
Yep.
You have to take care of them all the time, no matter where you are. Earplugs, protect them. And then also in the studio, just make sure you're taking frequent breaks, that you are very aware that sound changes within an environment, and depending on where you're sitting, maybe move back, move forward, stand up, sit down, all kinds of directions, because sound is different. And then once you're done with that mix, take it out to your car, throw it in your CD player, listen to it on a pair of AirPods, whatever it is. Try to listen to that mix in as many different ways as possible, because that mix needs to translate to as many different mediums as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to, to touch on what you just said, there's times when I've been working with an artist in the studio and, they may sit back in the corner while I'm working, while I'm mixing. And when they're sitting back in that corner, they're like, oh man, it sounds a little bass heavy. And I'm like, the bass is stuck in that corner. Okay. Come listen to where I'm sitting and then tell me what you hear. Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. Exactly. Depending on exactly what you said, depending on where you're sitting in that room, you're going to get a completely different mix. And as an engineer, it's good for you to walk around and kind of hear that mix. And just to touch on one other thing you said that's brilliant. I used to be looking to, of course, try to work in a efficient manner so that, people aren't spending, their last dollar while you're trying to mix, but sometimes you can be doing people a disservice by not taking the breaks that you need and giving your ears the rest that you need. And I had a guy put it to me like this. He said, take a 5-pound weight and you sit there and lift it, do curls with that 5-pound weight. Your arm is so strong in the beginning, but after an hour, that 5-pound weight feels like 500 pounds. And that's exactly what happens to your ears. If you just sit there and you're just jamming music into your ears, after a while, they get tired, they get fatigued like any other muscle. And next thing you know, you're not hearing anything in your mix.
Yeah.
Hey guys, that's where we're going to end it for episode 21. When Tynz came on, we had a great conversation that actually ended up going over. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this into 2 parts. As always, thank you for joining us. Questions, concerns, comments, fretbuzzthepodcast.com. Thanks again for listening, guys. Have a good one.